Hi friends, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to dive into the book confessions tag. I was very kindly tagged to do this by Beth. I'll leave her channel linked down below. And of course, I'll leave the people that I tagged to do this down below as well. But I thought this tag would be really fun to take on, and I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what other people's answers are as well. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, so the first question is, what is an unpopular book preference that you have? Now, I know that everyone really enjoys the enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers tropes, and so many people enjoy that in romances, and I like it sometimes, but it's generally not my favorite. I know people like to rag on the friends to lovers dynamic in romances, but personally that's my favorite. I just love when romances have a very established relationship between the two characters and you get to grow and learn with each of the characters as well before it becomes a romance. I think that way you feel a lot more connected to the characters and to the relationship as a whole. And yeah, that's one just unpopular opinion that I have that I think a lot of other people may not agree with, but that's just how I feel. All right, question number 2 is, has your reading taste changed over the years, and if so, how? And I think yes, my reading taste has definitely changed over time. I think that I'm a lot more open to reading romance and spice in my books now than I was when I was younger, obviously, as I've grown up and matured. But also I read a wider range of genres now than I did when I was younger. I know that when I was little I leaned heavily in on fantasy and fairy tale retellings. I read a lot of books like the Magic Treehouse series and the Land of Stories series as well, and things like that. That was the kind of books that I was reading at that time. I didn't read too many contemporary books. I read some books like Jeannie B. Jones and things like that are a little more contemporary, but those are of course middle grade books, and I was reading coming of age stories more, whereas now I feel like I'm not really reading as much of those coming of age stories, obviously because I'm an adult now, and I've read a lot more classics and just expanded my palette so much more. And I think nowadays I'm more likely to just pick up a book from a genre I don't normally read randomly than I would have back then. I definitely had a comfort zone and I stuck within it very much when I was a young reader. I also just wanted to add that I think I've read a lot more books that have hammered me emotionally, have had a very visceral emotional response from me than I did when I was younger. I read those books from time to time now, and I think that has developed my sense of empathy for characters and for people in the world in a way that it just had not fully developed yet when I was a child. Okay, so question number 3 is, what genre do you read to get out of reading slump? And then I would say I probably pick up a lot of romance to get out of a reading slump. I honestly just love falling in love with two characters, seeing how they grow and how they learn and their attachment to each other. That's always something that I can get behind usually, and a light fluffy romance is just usually the perfect cure for a reading slump for me. The reason why I get into reading slumps a lot of times is because I'm reading a lot of very emotionally intense books or books that are very dense, like the Outlander series, which can be very taxing for my brain. So switching to something that's light and fluffy where I can turn my brain off a little bit more with a romance is usually what I would go to for getting out of a reading slump. Okay, and then the next question is, what are some of your automatic buy authors? And I think this will really come as no surprise, but Suzanne Collins obviously is going to be an auto buy author always. The Hunger Games trilogy has been just something that has really stuck with me. Anything she writes in that series I will buy. And Cassandra Clare, for the most part, is also an auto buy author. I love her fantasy stories, and it was one of the series that got me back into reading in 2019. And I think that Kristen Hanna is another author that is slowly becoming an auto buy author. I don't know if she's there yet, but I've loved several of her books. I really like The Four Winds and Firefly Lane by her, and I'm so excited to dive into The Women. I think that she will eventually become an auto buy author for me. I also wanted to mention that for historical romance, Lisa Kleypas, I'll pretty much buy anything that she's written. I know she's not publishing now, but I've been slowly collecting her backlist, so that's another auto buy author for me. All right, the next question is, how many chances will you give an author before you won't try them again? Now, I think my general rule of thumb is 2 to 3 stories or books. So that could be novellas, full-length books, prose, poetry, anything like that. And sometimes I'll give them 3 tries, especially if they have a very extensive backlist, or if a lot of people have been really recommending them to me, or I feel like I will connect with their stories, just that one particular story didn't work for me. But sometimes I'll only give them 2 tries, especially if they did something very egregious. I mean, if they did something horrendous in one book, I'm likely not gonna pick anything else up by that author again, just being frank. frank. But I do like to give myself a little bit of time in between books by the same author, just in general, but especially if I didn't like their previous work. Like I just read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood and I didn't really love that one, so I do plan on reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood and trying out some of her other books, but I do need to give myself a little bit of time. I'll try out Bride and maybe one other book and then decide from there if Ali Hazelwood is an author that I personally connect with or not. But generally my rule of thumb is 3 strikes and you're out. Okay, the next question is, do you have anything in particular that you like to do or listen to while you read? So I really like listening to music, and I like to sip on a matcha or a passion fruit tea with lemonade, of course, while I read. I think that really enhances my reading experience. I love having a fun drink. It just brightens my day a little bit. And when I'm reading or I want like to just take a break, I'll take a sip. I'll sometimes log on my phone and just scroll for a minute, and it just kind of recharges me a little bit. But I love listening to music that is like instrumental for the most part. I don't like music with a lot of lyrics unless it's like an action scene, and then I'll listen to like very powerful, intense music that has those strong lyrics which get me into that vibe and that mood. But otherwise I find lyrics to be distracting when I'm reading, so I like instrumentals. Sometimes some soft or not a lot of lyrics won't bother me, but I do like to have some background noise because I find silence can be a little eerie for me when I'm reading, but that's just my personal preference. All right, the next question is, how far will you read before you DNF a book? And honestly, I think I've read pretty far into a book before DNFing it. I've read 80 or 90% into a book and said, I can't do this anymore. I know there's one book in the like Sweet Magnolias world, I'll leave the book here, but that series that I read the first book and I got 80 or 90% into it and I just DNF'd it because I could not continue with it anymore. I've also DNF'd books pretty early on into the process, but I'll usually give it at least 100 to 150 pages, 150 to 200 pages if it's a long tome like one of the Outlander books, and I would say that that's my general rule of thumb before I'll DNF a book. So for example, with The Fiery Cross, since I recently did my review on this, I really did not connect with this book, and the first 200 pages I gave it before even thinking about quitting on it, and eventually I just pushed through the book mainly because I was already invested in the series. And I do find that if I'm invested in a series and it's like a middle book, sometimes I will push through just to get to the next book, and I was rewarded with A Breath of Snow and Ashes after this. But for the most part, I just would have quit otherwise. I think being part of a series motivates me to continue reading books. I think for a book of this size, I would give it at least 200 pages to try it out because this is almost 1,000, so really you have to give it at least like a quarter or a fifth of the way through before quitting, in my opinion. All right, the next question is, do you ever find yourself making the same faces as the characters in a book? Now, I'm not really sure about this. I don't think I really mimic the characters' faces, but I don't read with a mirror in front of me, so I can't tell you for sure. I do think I make a lot of expressions. Like if I'm surprised, you will see that I'm surprised by something I'm reading in the book. If I get mad at that book, you'll hear me like slapping the book gently, but you'll hear me like making noises because I am reacting to it. I have very visceral reactions to books sometimes, but I don't think that I really mimic the characters' reactions to things. I more have my own kind of responses to things in the book, and I just am taking in the story so closely that I'm not mimicking their faces so much. I'm just trying to figure out what's next, what's coming, what is going on in the plot. I'm more trying to put the pieces together rather than reacting at every little thing. Okay, and then the next question is rereading. Yes, no, or depends. And for me, it definitely depends. There are some books that I will just never reread. For a lot of romances and things like that, I just won't reread them again, especially if it was very fluffy and light and there wasn't something that I felt really connected to. For series, I do tend to reread the books if it's been a while since I've read them and a new book is coming out, or if I'm just trying to finish the series and it's been a long time and I don't remember what happened, I'll go back and read the previous book. But I don't like to reread too often because I have so many new books that I want to get to on my TBR. It's something that I very carefully like to plan out, and there are a few books like the Hunger Games trilogy that I will go through and reread every few years, every 3-4 years. But for the most part, I don't like to reread too much unless I'm in a reading slump, and then I'll reread a favorite, which will help me get out of that slumpy feeling and get me excited for reading again. That's the only time where I think I'll just give myself free reign to reread any kind of book that I'm feeling at that time. Okay, and then the last question, or the last prompt rather, is tag other booktubers. So I'm gonna leave the people that I have tagged down below because I can't think of people on the spot, but I'll tag you down below, and I'm super excited to see people take on this tag. I think it's a pretty fun one, and I always love to know what people's thoughts are on reading and their preferences and all of that, so So if you'd like to take on this video or this idea, you can definitely do so even if I didn't tag you. You can tag me in the comments or the description of your video and I'll definitely go check it out because I love to hear other people's thoughts. Alright, so that's gonna be it from me for today. So if you like this video, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'd love to hear about some of your book confessions down below. Are there any books that you've DNF'd super early on? Or are there any kind of book confessions that you want to make? I'd love to hear any of your thoughts below. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for watching to this point. I appreciate all of you and all of your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!